And Orca would like to gratefully acknowledge and thank Mr. Stephen Pro for all his help and advice in putting on this show. Please welcome Stephen Pro.
And while Ray's here, I just want to thank Orca, of course, for inviting me, and specifically Ray and John and Naomi. They've been an absolute pleasure to work with. And speaking as someone who has attended 10 previous MACNAs, this one has been by far my favorite. You guys did a fantastic job. So, when Orca actually invited me to speak, I asked them, do you have a theme to the show? Do you have tracks? What are you looking to have me talk about? And Russell actually said, we'd like you to talk about aquarium lighting. And my first response was, what, isn't Sanjay coming? So they said, yeah, but we want you to do something a little bit different than what Sanjay is doing. So we kicked things back and forth, and I was very nervous about doing something on aquarium lighting because at the time I worked for an aquarium lighting manufacturer. Lucky for you, I actually got unemployed in July, so now I'm free to say whatever I want because I originally had a very generic kind of talk where I wasn't talking about any product, but I've been working like crazy over the last month and a half, 2 months, trying to redo it, to open it up and hopefully show you some new information and maybe a little bit different flavor to what you're used to. Okay. Little bit of brief history. When I started out, we had T12 normal output bulbs, which are the big fat 40 watt, 4-foot fluorescents that you've seen at Home Depot for your standard shop lights, things like that. A little bit later, we developed T12 HO and T12 VHO, and the HO stands for high output and very high output for VHO. And the T numbers, I don't know if you all know, but T is about the diameter of the bulb and how many eighths of an inch it is. So T12 is 12/8 of an inch or 1.5 inches. That's why T5 is 5/8 of an inch in diameter. So that has to refer to the T. And then eventually we got medium base metal halides, then your mobiles and your double-endeds, and a much higher intensity lights, much more things we were able to keep. Then we had, we played around with power compacts for a little bit, and then T5s kind of rolled around and kind of supplanted a lot of the other fluorescent technologies, and now we're starting to get some LEDs going to give us an interesting twist, different colors, different efficiencies than what we're used to. So back when we had to run these T12 bulbs, we had to just pile the bulbs in as tight as we could against an aquarium to get any decent amount of light in there. So we generally ran about a 50-50 mix of full spectrum daylight lamps to blue actinic lamps. And say we had a 90-gallon aquarium, we'd have 6 bulbs packed in there to get you enough light to keep some basic kind of corals. Soft corals, mushrooms, LPS, things like that. And we did okay that way. This is actually a picture of one of my very first reef tank. And you can see some of the stuff we're talking about. A lot of LPS, a lot of euphyllias, the big, where's my cursor? The big elegance coral. This is actually a terminaria with the ricordie all over the place. About the highest intense light, this is actually a brownish plating monty, the terminaria reniformis, and then this yellow leather coral. Those are the highest light things we had. And they worked pretty well. You, like I said, you had to put a bunch of bulbs in there, so to do any kind of maintenance, you had to pull the whole hood off to get in there with your hand, so it wasn't all that useful. And you had to change the bulbs at least every year. Okay, we progressed. We got to the T12 HO and the VHO bulbs. Much higher light intensity per tube that allowed us to cut back. Again, on this theoretical 90, you could put 4 tubes in there. You were even brighter and you had less bulbs. So you had some space to get your hands in there to actually do some stuff. We were still running about half and half, full spectrum to actinic. And we went from, on the theoretical 90 that I did before, we got up to 440 watts on a tank, most aquariums. So we increased in wattage, but we also increased considerably in intensity as well. Still replacing the bulbs about once a year though. We got our first metal halide bulbs. These were medium base, which probably most of you aren't familiar with, but they were real small screws, closer to like the screw, for your regular light bulbs, incandescent light bulbs. And they came in any color under the sun, as long as it was somewhere in between urine and lemonade. They started out at about 4,500 and got up to about 6,500 K, which is a white with a strong yellow component. Because of all that yellow, we were still running a lot of supplemental actinic. So you would run a couple metal halide bulbs and run your VHOs along with it. So again, we progressed. We got much brighter light, much higher par, because these were mostly Iwasaki bulbs or Philips bulbs, real high intensity bulbs. And you actually still can't find them because Iwasaki still makes these for other applications. I actually still own a bunch of the ballasts. And again, though, we increased from 440 watts to 520 watts. But again, we increased our intensity dramatically as well. Also started getting a lot better reflectors made from metal halides. And again, this is one of my aquariums. This is my 120. And you can see there's some acros in there along with everything else that moved its way up from the 55. But the carpet anemones, the bubble tips, things that are higher light. There's actually a crochet clam tucked in behind this guy here. And you could keep clams in your VHO tanks, but you had to keep them up so high you couldn't see them. So you had to keep them up in the top of the rockwork to get them enough light. With halides, you can keep things down and actually start looking down on them. Ended up getting a little bit better with metal halides, started getting the moguls, which opened up with colors. And again, right around here too, we started getting some really great reflectors along with that. In colors all the way from 6,500K to 20,000K. Broad range of colors, all interchangeable, much better, more efficient ballast. We got away from a lot of the core and coil ballasts, the magnetic ballast to electronic ballast, so you're not just burning through a lot of extra watts. And we stayed about the same. So for most people, they ended up ditching their supplemental actinics and just picking like a 14K bulb or 15K bulb, something that was a pleasing color, or even 20Ks for those that really like the blue, and used two 250s, either in double-ended or mogul. And so you're about 500 watts. Again, though, more intense, a lot of that having to do with much better reflector design as well. Sometime after halides, while people were still playing around with VHOs as supplemental light, we got power compacts. And I hate them. I really do. As Ray mentioned, I've spent 15 or probably 16, 17 years in the hobby, but 15 of it also in the business, working at a local pet shop, and then graduating up. I've always disliked power compacts from the business standpoint, in that there's too many to possibly stock. You have your square pin, you have straight pin, you have 96, 65, 55, 40, 36, 32, 27, 24, 18, 13, and 19 watts. And all of those come in straight and square pins. So there's 22 SKUs, and that's if they're all the same color. So from a standpoint of a business, I never really liked power compacts, and they never made sense to me anyhow. I'm running a 4-foot, 110 watt VHO actinic, and I'm going to change it out for two 55 watt power compacts. I have saved nothing. I've spent money in new end caps, new ballasts, and I've gotten nothing much better. Plus, they don't last. I mean, they still need to be replaced once a year. So there was never really any upside to power compacts, except for the nano tanks. They made small ones for those. So that was about really the only application that I saw. So now we have the T5HO. And part of the other thing that came out when power compacts first came out is they were talking about how these bulbs were going to last a lot longer than we're used to. And that's been kind of a thing that I keep seeing with every new technology. It started with power compacts, it repeated itself with T5, and it's made me a skeptic when the LEDs has come out, that every time they launch a new technology, they're always telling me they're going to last 2 to 5 years. And every one of these technologies so far has lasted about a year. Same things happen with T5. You're replacing your bulbs at least once a year. Although they are still a significant upgrade over other fluorescents. That very thin diameter, that 5/8 of an inch diameter tube, lends itself to making exceptionally good reflectors. You can make some nice little gull wing reflectors, which really throw in a lot of light in there. Compared to a VHO tube, by the time you put a tube in there that's 1.5 inches, you try and build a reflector around it that's 4 inches, you've hogged up too much space. So you really can't use a good reflector on those big fat bulbs. So one of the other things I've noticed, though, and you'll see it a lot out in the trade show and the guys that are doing T5s, is that we switched from doing half and half blue and white lamps to a lot more like 3 blues to 1 white. Some guys will be out there with 5 or 7 blues to 1